Well, we're officially in a footballing dead period, an African footballing dead period. Um, Players are back at their clubs, the international window's over, the African Champions League and the CAF Confederation Cup are not going to be played anytime soon. It's really until the month of November. And so I thought I'd take this opportunity to maybe reflect on what we saw, just make some final global reflections about the international window in October with a slight look ahead to what's coming in November before we start focusing completely on club football before the next international break. All of that next on the African Five-A-Side podcast. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the African Football Roundup on the African Five-A-Side podcast. I'm your host, Maher Mizahi, and this podcast, as always, is brought to you by africasaCountry.com, the best website when it comes to African affairs, whether they be cultural, whether they be political, social, economic, or whether they be in the sporting realm. In my opinion, it's your number one place to go to get an interesting perspective on what's going on in our continent. So please go check them out. Please go check us out, I should say. And the link is in the description below. So, that was a very interesting and uninteresting international break in October. It was simultaneously intriguing because there were some pretty major upsets, some big storylines, but at the same time, it more or less went as we expected it to. And that's probably been one of the consequences of the Afcon becoming a format, the extended format of the African Cup of Nations, where there are 24 teams now that compete in this competition, is that, the giants or the very strong teams in Africa are going to be qualifying almost without any trouble. And there's one exception. There's almost always one exception. And I think we're going to start by talking about teams that will be going with a lot of uncertainty into the international break in November. And the one exception for me, the team that goes in with the biggest amount of uncertainty is Ghana, the Ghanaian Black Stars. If there's one team that's relieved that the international break is over, it's Ghana. In October, they took 1 point out of 6 matches. Remember, October was one of those international breaks where it's a double header. You play against one team home and then you play against the exact same team away from home. And they were matched up against Sudan. Sudan, if you recall, as we spoke about on this podcast as well, um, doing historic things, despite the fact that they're not playing football in their country, despite the fact that the country is being torn apart by civil war, they found ways to adapt in exile. It's a great story, and they continue to prove that they're a very coherent side against Ghana. And Ghana is in shambles. The first match they drew with Sudan in Accra, in Ghana, and the second match they end up losing 2-0. Um, and what's going on now, I mean, what I've been seeing, what I've been reading coming out of the former Gold Coast is just simply a lot of reflection, a lot of confusion. People are trying to figure out what's going on. How did we stoop this low? How did we get here? And I've also been seeing some people saying, "Why are you surprised?" And I thought that was an interesting rebuttal because if you look at the Ghanaian national team from 2008 until 2017, they were probably the most consistent side in Africa. Not probably, they were. They had 6 straight top four finishes in the African Cup of Nations in 2008, 2010, 2012, 13, 15, and 17. They made it to the top four in every single AFCON, whether that be whether they finished runners up or in third place or in fourth place. They were never champions. And that was the criticism against them, was that they would always get to that level and then somehow fall off. But still, they were qualifying and they were doing pretty well. And when you factor in the World Cup performances, in 2006, they get out of the group stages after they qualified for the first time ever in their country's history. That was a very memorable World Cup, I think, for a lot of Ghanaians. And then 2010, right? They had us all dreaming, the entire continent, about the first African team going to the semifinals of a FIFA World Cup. And then, of course, Morocco does that in 2022. But we all remember how great they were in South Africa and how they became sort of Africa's flag bearer in that tournament. And so you could say that that was a golden generation from 2008 to 2017, about a decade. If we look at from then on, 2018 they missed the FIFA World Cup. 2022 they were okay. They finished with one victory, but they're eliminated in the group stages. And in the Afcon, my goodness. 2019, they get into the round of 16, eliminated to Tunisia in penalties. Not horrible, but not great. 2021, eliminated in the group stages to Comoros, if you remember, in Cameroon. That was a very, very memorable match, um, and one that I think was the first of severe blows to the Ghanaian footballing psyche. And then in 2023, again eliminated in the group stages. And the manner in which they were eliminated, they were winning 2-0 against Mozambique in the final match day of group play. They just have to hang on for, they were in extra time. They just had to hang on for, I think, 5, 6 minutes, something like that, that the referee gave. And they end up conceding 2 goals in extra time. And Mozambique draws level 2-2, and Ghana is eliminated. I think it's Mozambique and Egypt that go through in, onto the knockout stages. And for a team like Ghana, for a team like Algeria to be eliminated, consecutive years in the group stages of a 24-team Afcon. Remember, we're almost in the majority of groups, there are 3 teams that qualify out of the group stages. That's absolutely unacceptable. Um, and so how did we get here? How did we have this sort of split into two from 2008 to 2017, from 2018 to 2024? We're now 6 years into the sort of I don't know how you could say it, like the doldrums, Uh, it's like in the Prophet Joseph story in the Bible, it's like the fat years and then the skinny years with the cows. Well, I read a really good article from Michael Oteaje. He's one of the veteran journalists in Ghana, and I'm going to link that article in the description below. And he goes into a lot of detail, but he like brings it down to mismanagement. That simply the Ghanaian FA, especially under Kurt Okraku, who's been at the helm during the demise really over the last 6 years, they've just made the wrong appointments when it comes to coaches. Maybe got rid of some coaches too early, bringing in the likes of Chris Hughton, who obviously did a horrible job at the Afcon, with all due respect. Um, Milovan Rajevac is somebody who perhaps the game has passed him by. He took Ghana to the 2010 quarterfinals of the FIFA World Cup, but I don't know, he's getting on in age, and just from his previous experiences, you could tell that he shouldn't be on the level that Ghana are seeking to aspire to be on. So that was probably a poor coaching hire. And now you're at Otoado, who I had high hopes for. When he was initially named coach of Ghana this time around, I thought it was a good decision. And you can go back, and I'm on the record saying that. I thought he did a decent job at the World Cup. They weren't horrible. And because he has, this experience in his career of working with a lot of young players, developing talent at Borussia Dortmund, I thought he could be the right man for the job for Ghana, because Ghana have so much young talent. Mohamed Kudus, of course, is not too young, but he's still on the ascendancy in his career. You have like New Ernest Nuama, Abdel Fattawi Sahaku, Ibrahim Osman is doing well in the Dutch league. There's a lot of young talent, Kamaldeen Suleiman, most of the Right to Dream, graduates, but also many more. And so I thought he could be the right one to lead the transition out of, the former generation, because it's true. They, well, this is the one argument that Otuado makes. He says, we don't have the players that we used to have. He says Ghanaians need to learn to lower their expectations. And this is where I was going with Otuado. Initially, I was understanding, I liked the coaching hire, but when he started making excuses like this is when I'm starting to check out, kind of. Because he goes on and he says, after the first match against Sudan, that Sudan got lucky and that they're not going to be lucky in the second in the second leg. That's not a smart thing ever for a coach to say. Never. You never say that. Ever, 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 ever. Not just because you're going to motivate the opposition, because the psychological mindset that puts your own players in is, oh, we did enough to win. You want your team to always be hungrier and hungrier and hungrier. You don't want them to be satisfied with where they are. You understand? So that was a horrible thing to say. And that shows me like a real lack of coaching experience. And then after the second match, he says, well, we don't have, players playing in AC Milan anymore. Like, yeah, you don't have Michael Essien. Yeah, you don't have Soliali Montari. You don't have a young Andre Ayew. You don't have Emmanuel Adjumeng Badu. But you do have talent. And guess what? Sudan also doesn't have Michael Essien. Comoros, who eliminated you, they don't have Michael Essien. Mozambique doesn't have Michael Essien. It's not like Ghana's being eliminated, against Morocco and against Cameroon and against Egypt and some of the sides that have really impressed in recent years, or Senegal on the African football scene. They're being eliminated against minnows. And so that kind of discourse for me, again, it's you're making excuses. And these are not excuses that are going to fly. And I don't like that Otto Addo is doing this. And I think to me, it hints that he's not made out to be a coach of such a big footballing nation. Um, mentally, psychologically, he's. I don't want to. It's not. I don't. It's too harsh to say it's a loser mentality, but I don't like the way he's going about, especially his declarations to the press. So, how do you get out of it if you're Ghana? And this is something that I think I've seen my own country go through a few different times, actually, Algeria. And excuse me as I take a sip of coffee. I remember very succinctly the 2018 FIFA World Cup qualifiers and Algeria playing against Zambia. And Algeria, I think, losing at home to Zambia. Algeria doesn't lose at home usually, but losing at home to Zambia and Constantine. And the FA president, after getting on the mic, and his words hit me right here, right in the heart. He said, Algerian football is sick. And I think that was the starting point for future improvement is everybody, whether that's the FA president, whether it's the players, whether it's the coach, everybody needs to understand that there's a problem and it's a profound problem. The cancer is seeping into your blood, into your bones, it's everywhere. And this is going to be a very lengthy process to get out of it. Because if you ask me if all these players are giving it their all, I do think they're giving it their all. I do think Otto is giving it his all. I do think the people at the Ghanaian FA really, really want to win. But they're not able to. And it's not just one time, it's not two times. We're going on to 6, 7 years of Ghana not being where they need to be. And so what it takes is total, absolute, complete humility and starting from zero. It's absolutely not after the first game saying Sudan got lucky. No. It's okay, we drew. We're gonna take the point. It's not ideal. We're okay with it. We're gonna try to do the same, if not a little bit better in the second leg. It's trying, clawing, scratching, fighting to get a 1-0 victory, even against Sudan. Even though I know Ghanaians feel like Sudan is never on their level, you know? And I think most African football supporters would probably agree with that, that historically, Ghana is a much more successful nation than Sudan, even if Sudan's footballing history is underrated. Try to win 1-0. Because the only way you can climb your way out of it is by stringing together little victories. Little victory, little victory, little victory. Be happy when you qualify for the Afcon. Look forward to the Afcon. Try to get out of the group stages again. Don't try to set your sights on the final and finally winning the Afcon again for the first time since when did Ghana last win? 1992, I think, or what? No, they were in final in 92. I don't even remember last time Ghana won. Was it 82? It might have been 82. Um, no, so set your sights on what's exactly in front of you. Get 3 points in the match that you're playing in. Qualify. Focus on match day one of the group in the group stages of the AFCON. 2, 3, 4. That's what you have to do now. And I think to do that, to get everybody on the same page, you have to have complete trust in your coach. Find someone that if you give it the means to, they're going to climb you out of this hole. I don't think Otto Addo is that person, especially after the previous international break. And it sucks because I think you signed him to a lot of money and he's Ghanaian and he understands the players and he understands the culture and everything. It might be somebody like Hervé Renard. And I know like a lot of people that watch this channel are not going to be happy that I'm advocating for, a European coach instead of a local domestic coach, but it doesn't have to be a European coach, but bring me somebody that has done what you need to do before, that always qualifies to the AFCON, that goes far in the AFCON, that knows how to do it, that has proved it at various different levels. Okay. If you can do that, hats off to you. Once you have your coach, you start from zero, fresh face, set your sights on the next match in November. You're probably not going to qualify because you need to win both matches and you need Sudan to lose both matches for you to qualify for Morocco 2025. So take the pressure off and let's start with baby steps. Win the first match in November, win the second match in November, see where you are there. Then you have 6 months before World Cup qualifying. 6 months to try and work with players from a distance, have Zoom calls, so on and so forth. Try and build together a coherent group to try and work your way up in the World Cup qualifiers. Because if Ghana has another catastrophic international window in March when the World Cup qualifiers start again, then you're just compounding and it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So, to recap, forget about qualifying for this AFCON, focus on exactly what's in front of you. Be happy with the little victories. Don't scoff at draws, don't scoff at 1-0 victories. Find a coach that you have absolute trust and belief in. Work with young players. You have a very talented young generation. Work with them. And eventually, little by little, you have to try to string together victories, and that's what's going to get the momentum rolling. I think that's the plan forward for Ghana, but my goodness gracious, I never thought I would see Ghana where they are now. They're just in the absolute dungeon, in the doldrums. So that's the first team that I think, has a lot of uncertainty in the next international window. Are they going to have the same coach? Are they going to have the same players? Are they going to have the same mentality? Who knows? The second one, which was not as bad actually. On the contrary, they had a quite good international break. They picked up 6 points as Senegal. Excuse me while I take another sip of coffee. So on this channel, we reviewed Senegal's first match against Malawi in the October window because that was Pape Thiaw's first match, the interim manager, after he took over from Aliou Cisse after Cisse was nearly there for a decade. Now, the second match was played in Lilongwe in Malawi, and it wasn't as pretty because in the first match, Senegal were attacking with an impetus that we had not seen often during Aliou Cisse's reign. Remember, Aliou Cisse had only ever scored 4 goals with the Senegalese national team on 3 occasions in almost 100 matches, and Pape Thiaw did it in his first match. The second one was much more like an Aliou Cisse's team performance. Senegal wins 1-0, but it's an artificial pitch in Malawi. It's like the playing surface is horrible. It's hot out. It's not an easy place to play, so I'm not gonna kill them for it. But it does provoke a few thoughts. It's Sadio Mane that saves them again. Um, and for the last 2, 3 years, it feels like we've been transitioning out of the golden era for Senegal. Your Kalidou Koulibaly, Idrissa Gueye, Sadio Mane generation. It feels like we were trying to leave them behind and maybe show some faith, in Ismail Assar, show some faith in, Iliman NGI, Pape Gueye, so on and so forth. And we thought they were going to take the mantle and become those world-class players. But what that second match showed me against Malawi was that when Senegal needs a goal, when they need somebody to pull them out of a hole, it's usually the old heads that still show up when necessary. So it's going to be interesting to see how the next coach works that transition and who the next coach is going to be. Because Pep Thiaw now has, by the way, he won the African Nations Championship. He was an assistant coach with Aliou Cisse. He has won his first 2 matches as head coach of the Senegalese men's national team. Can you fire him now? And if you listen to what the Senegalese FA and the Ministry of Sport are looking for in a candidate, they're looking for somebody that's Senegalese. They're looking for somebody that's not going to be too expensive, somebody that knows the players. Pap Thiaw for me is the perfect candidate until he proves that he's incompetent. For now, everything that he's done in coaching with the Senegalese national team proves that he's competent. So why wouldn't you give him the job? And he's going to be probably half of what Aliou Cisse was costing you in terms of coaching salary. But there are other options. There are French Senegalese players. There are French Senegalese coaches or Senegalese coaches that are coaching in France. Somebody like Omar Daf has their coaching diplomas, is very well respected in the second division of French football, coaching teams like Sochaux, Dijon. Um, he has a lot of experience at the club level, and he was a teammate of Aliou Cisse's in the 2002 FIFA World Cup. He's a very interesting name. I've spoken to him before, and he seems to have interesting ideas about football in general. Habib Bey, apparently, a former television consultant, and now he's been coaching for the last few years. Former captain at Olympique de Marseille, right back, very cool, very level-headed, very intelligent personality. He could be another option, but I think Omar Daf and Habib Bey are going to be a little too pricey. You know, it's gonna be interesting seeing if Senegal, the FA and the Ministry of Sport are very ambitious and they want to bring in one of those names to try and maybe do something at the World Cup, or if they're just gonna rest on their laurels and stay with Pap Thiaw and say, you know what, don't change a winning formula. We've done very well with the sort of modus operandi that Aliou Cisse has instilled. Let's continue it. So, me personally, I think they're leaning towards Pap Thiaw again for all of the reasons that I mentioned before. His salary, the players knowing him, he's 2-0 as a coach. But they also cannot mess this coaching appointment up because they're behind Sudan in FIFA World Cup qualifiers. And again, World Cup qualifiers are next March. They've qualified for the Afcon already, but they have to make sure they get this coaching decision right because if they bring in somebody that messes things up, it's going to have very real implications for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Finally, the third and final team that I think has a lot of uncertainty in November is Tunisia. And Tunisia is a rudderless ship. It is an airplane in flight with no pilot. The Federation has been in cruise control since the former FA president Wadi Al was incarcerated. He's in prison. He's been in prison since October 2023 after a very long drawn out dispute with the Ministry of Sport. Um, Look, after he was put in prison and after Tunisia had a poor Afcon, um, there was supposed to be a successor put in place in May, but until now, Tunisia is still under a normalization committee with FIFA due to the fact that they just keep postponing and delaying elections, and that's why I say there's no pilot in the airplane. It's a rudderless ship, and it's not looking good, especially when it comes to hiring the right person as a coach, because they had Jalal Qadri, who was a former interim, and then he under Munder Kbeir, if you remember, during the Afcon 2021, and then Qadri somehow miraculously gets them to the 2002 FIFA World Cup, 2022 FIFA World Cup. He doesn't do a great job, really. People don't think he's a good coach. Then another interim coach, an interim duo is put into place actually. Um, and then after that, Fawzi Benzerti comes in and he's been appointed coach for the last couple of matches. And Fawzi Benzerti is like a legendary coach in African and in Tunisian football. But he's sort of like the spare wheel, you know, he's like the emergency tire that you have in the trunk of your car. It's like it seems like whenever one of the big clubs in Tunisia need a coach, they can't find somebody, they bring him in. He provides a really good adrenaline boost, a shot to the arm for 6 to 12 months, and then he's on to the next job, on to the next job, on to the next job. And I don't know if he's also past it or not. I think he might be. And I think them going to him was a desperate move. The Federation is a skeleton of itself. There's not enough budget to hire enough employees or to hire a great coach. And it's not like there are no good Tunisian coaches out there. You know, you have Nasreddin Nabi that did a fantastic job at Young Africans, and then he went to AFR Rabat. He's winning leagues all over the continent, and he's not really a known commodity in Tunisia. But Nasreddin Nabi, I know I have it on good authority that he would be interested in a Tunisian job at the right time. Mehdi Nefti is another coach that has his coaching badges, coached in the second division in Spain for a very long period of time. But again, do you have the budget to hire them? And they're Tunisians, so they would probably come, if not with like a huge budget or anything. But why would they come right now? Federation is kind of bankrupt. Player options are limited. You have like no real striker. They haven't had a striker in a long time. Your best creative player, Youssef Misakni, is very old and aging. Good defensive midfield, interesting pieces in defense, but there's no energy around the team. And the fact that there's no energy, there's no propellant coming from the Federation, that would make me very hesitant if I was a Tunisian coach to come and take up this job on from the Carthage Eagles. So yeah, a competent federation, for example, would have secured a player like Ismail Gharbi from Braga, 20 years old, very intelligent, technical attacking midfielder, that former PSG, but he's currently at Braga. They have Hannibal Mejbri, who's been really, really good in the last few matches for Tunisia. There is good young talent around Tunisia, but there's something. It seems like the national team is on cruise control. They're sleeping and they're just coasting along, qualifying to the Afcon. Remember, Tunisia's qualified to every Afcon since 1994, but they haven't won one since 2004. And so I expect them to qualify again, even though they drew and lost to Comoros. So they also only took 1 point from 6 matches, like Ghana. But unlike Ghana, they were already had a head start from the first two match days of Afcon qualifying. I expect them to qualify. But for them to really become the Tunisia that we know, they need a strong and competent football federation. Uh, and that comes with a strong personality as president, and they also need a lot of cash. So, yeah, those are the three teams that I think have a lot of uncertainty in November. There are 6 or 7 teams that I thought had great international breaks. I'm going to try to go them much quicker. Morocco, in my opinion, perfect international break. They learned more about their team, and that, for example, some of the young players that we had questions about, they took the mantle and showed a lot of impetus and drive. Players like Elias Ben Saghir and Abd Samad Al Zazouli scored goals, created chances. They look like they're ready to step up. So Walid Regragui learned more about some of his young players. Um, he also tried new formations, that like 4-4-2 or 4-2-4. No, not 4-2. It's like a 4-4-2 or a 4-2-2-2 kind of, with like that box midfield. We talked about it in the film study video on this channel where they were very asymmetrical, leaving Ashraf Hakimi isolated on the right side, and how that worked really, really well. You also found a very good backup left back in Belamri, the Raja Casablanca left back. Still some outstanding questions, like who is your second center half after Nayef Agarid? Is it going to be Shadi Riyad, who's injured, Crystal Palace center half? I don't think that Jamal Harkus did a good enough job as a center half, but there's like, Ashraf, that there's a few different center halves, but they need to find somebody that's stable and ready to be Agarid's partner in the center of defense. So who is that? They have 14 months to figure it out. Can the strikers, Sufyan Rahimi and Ayoub El Kaabi, keep this up? That's another good question, because Rahimi scored again, El Kaabi didn't score, but I thought they showed a lot of good, again, impetus, drive, and so on and so forth. And then finally, my last question for them, and I think this is a question that we're going to start asking closer to the AFCON, is will the pressure and the weight of history weigh down on this team when the AFCON comes around? Because, hey, they haven't won it since 1974, 76. I think 74. It's been 50 years. So they need to win this time at home with the best team on paper in Africa. And most importantly, avoid injury. Because if you have an injury to, for example, like Abdesamad Zazouli, for example, there's enough wingers in Morocco or attacking midfielders to sort of take his place. But if you have an injury to Hakimi, there's no right back like Hakimi, or that brings what Hakimi brings. Or even though Sufyan Rahimi, for example, or Ayoub El Kaabi is not as good a player as Hakimi, in my opinion, they're almost as important, because since they've been playing as strikers, Morocco has been knocking in a lot of goals. Algeria also had a good international window. Defensively, they're not there yet, but they're making very real progress. I like the move of putting Issa Mandi, the center half, as a right back. But same question as Morocco. Who's your second center half? You have Rami Bensabeni from Borussia Dortmund as a left center half. Who's your right center half? Otherwise, good rotation in midfield and attack. Yeah, Vladimir Pekovic is playing a lot of players. Some players are becoming indispensable. They're becoming undroppable. Hussam Awar, for example, currently playing for Al Nasser. No, not Al Nasser. Al Ittihad in Saudi Arabia, scoring so many goals from midfield. Hisham Boudawi had a great international window. I hope he can stay consistent, because if he does, Algeria's midfield is starting to take place. You have those two, and then one of Ramiz Zarouki or Ismail Ben Nasser as the final piece, and all of a sudden, that midfield that has been really like a mess since 2019, all of a sudden is really solid. And so, yeah, my questions for Algeria are: can the veterans maintain their level or improve? Players like Mahrez, Bounedjah, Mondi. Can promising players like Boudawi, Amoura, and Guiri be consistent and injury free? But Algeria's on track. I think we're in a good place after Jamal Belmadi left, after he was in charge for 5, 6 years. And so that was a very tricky period of time. It wasn't easy at the beginning, but I think people are happy with where Algeria is at the moment. Other teams that had very, very good international windows: Egypt. Again, what more could you expect from Hussam Hassan, right? You bring in a guy on a fraction of the salary of his predecessor, Rui Vitoria, and he just doing a great job. We were worried that they were going to be very erratic and explosive, and they do have outbursts sometimes on a touchline, him and his brother Ibrahim Hassan, who's also on the staff. But I think they're getting the best out of a lot of their players. Most of the team is pretty much, we know who the players are. Uh, Again, questions about maybe a left back, um, questions about who are the front line three going to be when it's all said and done. But my goodness, like, I think Egypt looked very, very strong. And I feel hesitant, because I thought the same thing before the Afcon in Cote d'Ivoire, and then they crashed out. But I really feel good about Egypt under Hussam Hassan. Again, they haven't played anybody of real note. I think just Croatia, if I'm not mistaken, the only match that Hussam Hassan lost. But I like where they're going. Like Algeria, they're on the right track. Cameroon. Who thought we would be talking about Cameroon as one of these teams? With all of the mess between Samuel Eto'o and head coach Mark Bryce in the Ministry of Sport, but they were dominant against Kenya. I was gonna say I know it's just Kenya, but no, that's a bad thing to say. But on paper, I think alongside Morocco and Cote d'Ivoire, uh, maybe Nigeria, I think Cameroon are the best 11. And Mbeumo is so good from Brentford. Vincent Abubakar, so good. Um, you can put whoever you want on the left wing. Um, Carl, or not Carl, that's Carl Topi Gambino. Andre Frank Zambo Anguissa in midfield alongside Carlos Baleba in midfield. Ongla and Kunde are not just like a friend of mine always calls them like Cameroonian bodyguards, like just physical players. No, they have technique, touch, they take set pieces. Um, Good players in defense. Andre Nana as a goalkeeper. Honestly, Cameroon 11, in my opinion, top three to top five in Africa. So the fact that they're playing well, they're winning matches by multiple goals at home, they're winning matches away from home. Shout out to is it Brian Eno who scored the goal in the second leg against Kenya? Beautiful strike from 30 to 40 yards out. He might add something else from midfield. Um, I really really like Cameroon. I've said that probably like six times now, but I think if they can find a little bit of serenity at the federation level, at the coaching level, they have that thing, right, where they show up in big tournaments against big teams. L'Amble, I think they call it. So never count them out. DR Congo, speaking about stability, kept their coach Sebastien de Sabre, kept practically the exact same team that took them to the quarterfinals, right? Not the semifinals, the quarterfinals of the Afcon in Cote d'Ivoire. It's still Muatasami and Pikel in midfield and Ilya Meshek and what's his name? Theo Bongonda on the wings. It's still Fiston Mayele as a striker, or maybe Silas Katompa, or maybe Simon Banza. They have a lot of strikers that they can use. Cedric Bakambu maybe at times. Chancel Mbemba in defense. It's practically the exact same team, and they've just cruised through qualifying and they've made it to Morocco. So credit to them for just being stable and consistent. And I think that is a very big indicator, in my opinion, that they can go far in the next AFCON. Is that as long as they have a decent draw and they're not in a group of death, the fact that they've been so stable, I think that spells very, very, very good things in the future. And you could just, everything that I just said about DR Congo, you can just apply it to Angola too. 12 points, four matches, four victories. Same coach who's been with them, by the way, with a generation of players for since 2019, I think. Um, Practically the same players doing very, very good things. So hats off to all of those teams that I thought had a very good international window. They're all, by the way, qualified to the 2025 AFCON in Morocco. We're gonna move quickly as we look to finish this podcast. Teams that made progress but that are not qualified yet: Sudan, Mali, and South Africa. Sudan, I watched uh, three quarters of uh, three quarters of halves of football. I watched the first match, the full first match, and I watched half of the second match. When I watched them play against Ghana, I saw a team that knew who they were and what they were doing. And that's like maybe a cliche, maybe that's journalist talk, but for me, it was quite clear on the pitch. They weren't trying to be too fancy, but they were organized. They didn't give up any silly mistakes, any stupid mistakes. Their best players, like Ramdan Ajib, like Mohamed Mustafa, the goalkeeper, like Karshoum, the center half, they played their best matches against Ghana. Mohamed Abdelrahman, very important goal as a veteran striker in the second match, and being pushed by that crowd, being pushed by the souls of Sudanese people all over the world as they're on this historic run. They're not fancy. They're not gonna go and beat Brazil. But I wouldn't want to be on a pitch facing Sudan because they're going to play with more hearts than you. And that goes a long way, especially in qualifiers. That goes a very long way. So I'm just really just enjoying the matches, and I'm just watching it match by match and seeing how far these guys can go. Can they qualify for the World Cup? I think they just need one more point to qualify for the AFCON. I think everybody thinks they're going to qualify for the AFCON. But the World Cup, that's another kettle of fish. And how special would that be? Mali, I like what they're doing in that they brought in Tom Saintfiet, and if you watch Tom Saintfiet, what he did with the Gambia, a little bit, cautious, making sure the defense is solid, making sure they're not giving up any stupid mistakes. And that was their problem, right, against Cote d'Ivoire, Mali, in was it the semifinals of the Afcon, how they were eliminated? Um, and if you look at his results, win, draw, win, draw, it's like, and they're winning 1-0. You see? What Tom Saintfiet is doing is what I need Ghana to do. Don't scoff at little results. Bring stability. Make sure you're getting points, whether they're, a draw or a victory. That's what they say in America, never turn down making a profit. Always take 1 point, always take 3 points, because it's very, very important to build momentum. And so I think he's doing a good thing, and I think Mali is on their way as well. And finally, South Africa. I promised everybody that I would watch South Africa, and I watched the first half of the second match against Congo. It wasn't as impressive, I think, as their first match when they won 5-0. But it's just more of the same, right? But my question with South Africa, I think everybody in the chat is gonna, or in the comments is gonna answer this probably, but you're playing like Kulisu Mudau. He has man of the match performances. Teboho Mokoena, man of the match performances. And then I look at Sundown's most recent fixture, and they're playing Tapelo Morena as a right back. I'm thinking, is Mudau still out of sorts with the manager? Uh, I don't understand why he would, like, for me, you can't like turn a player like that down. He's so good. But when I watch them, it's mostly Sundowns, right? Almost all over the pitch. And I see that some Sundowns fans are making fun of Pirates fans, saying, like, there's no Pirates players in the team. But yeah, it's Sundowns all over the place, and they're just playing their good football as they were. What we said about DRC and Angola, we can apply to South Africa. Consistency, stability at the coaching level, at the federation level, and on the pitch with the players. Players, they were like 26, 27 when they were playing in Cote d'Ivoire. Maybe they're going to be 29, 30 when they play in Morocco. Give it one last good go, and maybe South Africa can shock us and make it deep into the Afcon. Before we wrap up, I'm not gonna go into detail about the next part of this podcast, but I think one thing that I wanted to do was check out what are the matches that that we should be watching in the final international window in November. You have Comoros against the Gambia. They're battling it out for second place in Group A, or maybe you can throw Tunisia in there as well. But that match, Comoros against the Gambia, is very, very important. That's one that I think um, everybody has to keep an eye on. Zambia versus Sierra Leone. Hey, Sierra Leone beat Cote d'Ivoire in Monrovia, but goodness gracious, I mean, that's a hell of a victory, 1-0. So Zambia, I didn't watch them against Chad. Apparently, there wasn't a lot of enthusiasm in the country. That could be a tricky one because Zambia also has to play Cote d'Ivoire, I think, and I don't think they're going to beat Cote d'Ivoire. So they have to beat Sierra Leone, and I think the match is being played in Sierra Leone. So that's a match that we have to keep an eye on as well. Gabon against Central African Republic. Woof. Central African Republic got thoroughly defeated against Morocco. Now Gabon has to play against Morocco. So same thing. They're probably not going to win that match. So it's probably going to come down to Central African Republic versus Gabon. Because Central African Republic plays Lesotho, we can assume that they're going to win that match. And whoever wins that last match is going to qualify for the AFCON. Can Central African Republic and coach Raul Savoy, who we had on the podcast, qualify for the first ever AFCON? That would be special. And finally, Mauritania versus Cape Verde. Cape Verde, one of the most impressive sides in Cote d'Ivoire. Played probably the best football in the tournament, but they're only on 3 points. And Mauritania are also on 3 points. And by the way, Cape Verde, I think, also have to play Egypt. So again, have to assume that they're not going to win that match. Maybe they will, because Egypt has already qualified. But then whoever's going to win that second match between the two of those countries, um, those are, I think, 4 matchups that we have to watch in November because they're going to be absolutely determinant in deciding who goes to the AFCON. So I think what we're going to do is right before the international break, we'll break those matches down in detail and we'll make predictions. But for now, we just wanted you to keep an eye on that looking forward. Comoros, Gambia, Zambia, Sierra Leone, Gabon, Central African Republic, Mauritania, Cape Verde. These teams are going to be battling for spots for the 2025 AFCON in Morocco. Anyways, we've been going for about, I think, 40 minutes now, so we're going to leave it there for now. Thanks for watching another episode of the African Football Report. Club football season, no African Champions League, life sucks. But what I'm going to do is next episode next week is going to be about profiling 4 or 5 clubs playing on the continent that I think we should talk about that are doing interesting things, whether it's a transfer strategy, whether it's the way they play their football. Five clubs to pay attention to that are probably like not mainstream. I'm not going to be talking about Sundowns or Esperance or Al Ahly, um, just so we can learn a little bit more about each other's clubs on the continent. I think that would be a good idea. So until then, thanks for watching. Check out africasaCountry.com and speak soon. Peace.
عشيق واجبني على قولي تصرى لك مصراني